morning and Merry Christmas, everyone. Hi, my name is Christopher Gill, and I'm a cloud advocate working out of Rochester, New York. I'm currently the manager of Microsoft applications at a legal firm. I am a blogger, a technical writer, a tech evangelist, and I really, truly just love sharing what I learn with everyone in the community. I consider myself a learn-it-all. I start roughly 40 different blog articles at any given time and maybe complete 2 of them every month. But the joys of having ADHD. It is what it is. I've been in the IT industry for 17 years, and 9 plus years have been focused on Microsoft Azure and the hybrid cloud architecture. I'm super excited to be part of this Azure Advent Calendar. Huge thanks to Gregor Suddy and Richard Hooper for the invitation, for the mentoring, and just the overall community spirit to get everyone in this season learning and talking about different facets of the Azure cloud platform. This is a wonderful event, and I couldn't be happier to be part of it, so thanks for having me. To kick us off, what exactly is Azure Sentinel? Well, Azure Sentinel provides intelligent security analytics across our enterprise. As Microsoft defines it, is a cloud-native security information event management, SIEM or SIM, depending on where in the world you are, and security orchestration automated response, or SOAR solution. Now, Azure Sentinel is designed to allow centralized view for our SOC folks to see security analytics and threat intelligence across the enterprise. Also allows a one-stop shop for that type of threat investigation and response, alert detection, and proactive threat hunting that we're all seeking in this age of, security and more involvement with the security landscape. Now, the data for this type of analysis is stored in an Azure Monitor Log Analytics workspace. And Azure Sentinel builds based on the volume of data ingested for analysis into Azure Sentinel, based on what's stored in that log analytics workspace. Azure Sentinel does offer a flexible and quite predictable pricing model. 2 approaches. One is capacity reservations. The other is pay-as-you-go. For the capacity reservations, you're billed on a fixed fee based on what tier you select, kind of giving you a little bit more of a predictable cost and a potential discount of up to 60%, which is pretty good. But again, you have to know what type of data you're sending to Azure Sentinel, what kind of data sets, typical ingestion rates for your enterprise. So there's a little bit of math, a little bit of homework that needs to be done there. But difference between that capacity reservation versus the pay-as-you-go. If you chose that pay-as-you-go and you're sending a lot of data, you could very quickly get in a little bit of trouble. So just be careful with that. And just so you know, you do have the flexibility to kind of opt out of any of those capacity tiers at any time after your first 31 days. Here I wanted to very briefly display how Azure Sentinel receives data from different Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph locations, as well as a number of Security Center and other third-party data sources. Those types of data sources or data sets can be broken down into these 3 data connection methods. For the first, Microsoft services, which cover, again, the Intelligent Security Graph of Microsoft and Office 365, including Outlook and SharePoint, Azure AD Audit and Sign-ins, Azure Activity Identity Protection, the Security Center, Information Protection, Advanced Threat Protection Alerts, Cloud App Security, Windows Security Events, and Windows Firewall. For the second option, we have the availability of external solutions via API or REST call, programmatically or via an agent. And again, this leads into 3 as well. These third-party providers from Barracuda, Symantec, Citrix Analytics, different firewall providers such as F5, proxies and endpoints, DLP solutions, threat intelligence providers, Linux servers, and other clouds such as AWS all provide data that can be ingested into Azure Sentinel, where these type of alerts can be reviewed, investigated, and acted upon by your Security Operations Center. Here's what I'd like to share with you today in what I call the 9 gifts of Azure Sentinel. Some of these we'll be going through in a live demo, while others we'll cover in a slide. But most importantly, we need to make sure that we start by creating a data set in security sources and ingesting those into Log Analytics Workspace. We'll then move into monitoring using workbooks and potentially automatically creating incidents from alerts. We'll then look at responding using analytics and task orchestration, as well as security automation and orchestration. We'll go through some brief threat detection and false positive minimizations, and we'll show a little bit of hunting for suspicious activities as well. We'll talk about investigating incidents, and we'll cover permissions in Azure Sentinel. Here we're going to begin by creating a new Log Analytics Workspace for our Azure Sentinel Workspace. I'm going to click Connect Workspace, and then create a new workspace. I'm going to use some best practice naming conventions. CFG, my initials, LA for Log Analytics, AZ Sentinel for Azure Sentinel Workspace, and then EUS for Eastern US location. I'm going to select an existing resource group that I've created earlier, and then I'm going to select East US. Notice that I'm using the pay-as-you-go pricing tier for my personal tenant. I'm going to click OK, and then OK again to begin creation of the Log Analytics Workspace. You'll notice the deployment is initializing, and this will take a few minutes to create itself and create the resources needed for Log Analytics. Notice you'll see that the Log Analytics Workspace has been created. I will now add Azure Sentinel Workspace to the Log Analytics Workspace. This will also take a few minutes to complete its resource deployment. Now that the Azure Sentinel Workspace has been deployed, notice that I will begin connection of data sources. As you see, there are over 30 some connectors currently available for us to select. We're going to start with Azure Active Directory by opening the connector page. On the connector page, you'll notice there are a few configurations that we need to complete to connect our sign-in logs as well as our audit logs. I'm going to go ahead and click Connect for both of these. And this will complete the data provider connection to our new Azure Sentinel Workspace. Now, it does take a little while, potentially up to 48 hours for this data to start flowing. I'm going to continue our efforts by connecting our Azure Activity data source connector. I'll click on Configure Azure Activity Logs. And then I'll select my subscription and click Connect. Again, your mileage may vary. This is a personal tenant for me. You may be doing this in other production tenants or other MSP tenants. As you see, there are plenty of connectors to begin connecting up to your environment. But here, we will focus on Office 365. As we did before, we need to follow the instructions, and this requires an installed solution to complete its integration and ingestion for logs. Now, again, I am doing this in a personal tenant. If you are in a production tenant, you would begin by clicking Add Tenant, and then you would log in using your appropriate credential, and if you're so lucky, using a passwordless approach to logging into your environment. I'm going to pause here because this is a private tenant and I do not have Office 365 or SharePoint available for my use. Now that we've connected data sources to our Azure Sentinel workspace, let's begin by looking at some of the out-of-the-box built-in templates that were designed to help identify attack vectors, known threats, and different suspicious activity escalation chains. We'll begin by clicking on the Analytics part of the blade, and we'll continue on the rule templates. Now this will take a few seconds to load, but as you'll shortly see, there are quite a few built-in templates available from the community and from Microsoft, helping to identify activities based on your needs. Each one of these can be customized, or they can be used as is, and they get updated on a pretty regular basis, especially the Microsoft rules. Note that there are 4 different template types available. Microsoft Security, which automatically create Azure Sentinel incidents based on alerts generated in other security solutions. Fusion types, which are based on advanced multi-stage attack detection in Sentinel and uses machine learning algorithms to correlate alerts. Machine learning behavioral analytics, templates that are based on proprietary Microsoft algorithms, and then scheduled types, which are scheduled queries written by Microsoft security experts. You also notice that the rules are ordered by severity, starting at high, going to medium, and then to low. We're going to begin by picking a simple rule named Create Incidents based on Azure Active Directory Identity Protection Alerts. We'll start by selecting the rule in the middle pane and then clicking Create Rule in the bottom right-hand corner. Here we'll accept the defaults for name and description as well as the status. You'll notice that the security service can be toggled to choose any of the available security service offered by Microsoft. We're going to change the severity to identify any high and any medium severity alerts, and we're going to click Next. You'll notice that there's a validation built in, and it will check your rule to make sure that there are no errors in any of the custom filtering. Go ahead and click Create, and Azure will do the rest. In a few seconds, you'll notice that your new rule will appear, and you'll be able to check it and activate it. Note that by default, it will be enabled. Next, we're going to configure a security playbook that allows Azure Sentinel to set automated threat responses to security-related issues detected by Azure Sentinel. This sometimes is a set of procedures or collection of procedures that can be run from Sentinel in response to an alert. It can also help automate and orchestrate your response or your organization's response, and can be run both manually or automatically depending on the specific alert. Examples of a security playbook could be if you see an attacker coming from a known malicious IP address, you could potentially open up a ticket for your ticketing system, send an alert to your security team, notify others in your organization, potentially begin to block the IP address or take any other type of action based on a logic app. Let's begin by creating a new security playbook. We'll click on Playbooks in the blade, Add Playbook. We'll give our new logic app a name, a resource group, and we'll say create. And now that the logic app is being deployed, we'll wait a few seconds, and then we can begin configuration of the logic app. Once the logic app deployment has finally completed, you'll be taken directly into the logic apps designer. You'll notice that the deployment has succeeded, and you can pick either a blank logic app or one of the pre-set conditional logic apps. Here we'll create a new blank logic app to show the power and flexibility of a no-code solution in logic apps as pertinent to Azure Sentinel security playbooks. We'll begin by clicking Blank Logic App. As we're working with Azure Sentinel, we'll begin by clicking on Azure Sentinel, and then we'll select one of the preview actions or triggers. It says when a response to an alert is triggered. Now we'll check to make sure that we have accessibility to send out an email. And I'll create a new step. And that new step would be to send an approval email. We'll go ahead and click on Send an Approval Email. We'll specify an email address. This guy might want to know what's going on in his environment. And then we'll add a new step. Inside of this step, we'll add a new condition. And inside of this condition, for demo purposes, we will target something in Azure Active Directory. We'll begin by typing Azure AD. We'll select Azure AD. And from here, we could say, based on this rule set, let's remove a member from a group. I'll stop here, but I wanted to at least give you an idea of what's available and how quickly you could build a rule set using Azure Logic Apps Designer in tandem with Azure Sentinel. The final live demo that I want to show you in Azure Sentinel is surrounding the hunting part of the threat management piece. Let's begin by clicking on Hunting. As this page loads, you'll quickly notice that there is information regarding MITRE ATT&CK framework. For those of you who don't know, MITRE introduced ATT&CK, otherwise known as Adversarial Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge, in 2013. This is a way to describe and categorize adversarial behaviors based on real-world observations. It's also a structured list of known attacker behaviors that have been compiled into tactics and techniques and expressed in useful matrices for the rest of the world to protect against cybersecurity attacks and different types of attacker behaviors. To begin, you'll notice that there are 82 built-in queries directly created by Microsoft to go out and take a look at what may be happening in your environment. You'll notice on the left-hand side that you can click to favorite these queries. And as you refresh the page, those favorites will appear at the top of the page so that you can run as frequently as you want those queries against your individual environment. For the demo purposes, we're going to take all of the queries, all 82, though I don't recommend you doing this against your production environments frequently. This environment is relatively new, just a few days old, so we're going to go ahead and click Run All Queries, and I want you to pay attention to this results column. As the queries are run, each one of these results will come back. For some instances, it will say non-applicable. For others, you'll see a count of potential results based on that specific rule set and what it may be finding, or hopefully not finding, in your environment. As you see, it ran pretty quick against my demo environment, and I do have a few items that have appeared for results. So I will sort it by results. And let's take a quick look. One rule that it triggered is based off of the sign-in logs data source, which, as we learned earlier, we just enabled recently. So let's take a look. We'll click on the rule itself and the query, and we'll click View Results. Well, this will take us into Log Analytics. Again, if you are not familiar with Kusto and the KQL language, my advice to you is to get familiar with that as soon as you can. Start small, but work your way up. Most of the resources within Microsoft, especially Microsoft Azure with regards to logging and analytics, require you to know KQL to some extent, at least a familiarity level. Most of the engineers are doing a fantastic job now building this stuff for you, as you can see, but it's great to kind of help yourself at times to custom build queries or adjust queries as needed. So as you'll see, there were 2 logins detected, one from the portal, one from an app service. And it just so happens to look like a new location. I've been tinkering with where I've been recording this video to make sure that I at least had some data to show you, but very quickly it found that this is unusual for my personal tenant. Logging in from this unknown location as a present, usually I'm located somewhere in central Rochester and not outside of Rochester. So security queries are absolutely doing their job. The last reason I say to be more familiar with the KQL and Kusto query language is that you'll notice this time range says set and query. For most of these queries, you can adjust on a different time range or interval. For some, you may have to dig into the query itself and adjust based on a time range. It could very well be a couple days, a couple weeks, maybe a full month, but just so you know, again, stressing that KQL is a very important tool set to have in your belt. Last but certainly not least, I want to draw attention to each one of these resources or results based on the query run. You can place a checkbox in front and add a bookmark. This add bookmark functionality is very, very powerful to help those investigating incidents within your environment. You could quickly add a note saying unexpected location, please review, and save this as a later incident that can be investigated. So as you're going through these logs and finding things that may be anomalies, that may be things that need additional investigation, this is a great feature to just go and quickly bookmark them. From the hunting blade, now that you've set a bookmark, you can quickly return to your bookmarks, find any of the bookmarks that you've selected, and click Investigate. Here you will begin to get additional information based on the sign-in details. Think of it this way. If this were a multi-stage attack, you can now see a timeline across your environment and across your resources, both on-premises as well as in the cloud, and see where this type of attack has taken place, on what resources this attack has taken place, and how to best find a resolution. As I was preparing for this video, I came across a bunch of examples showing how powerful the Azure Monitor workbooks are inside of Azure Sentinel. I want to show you these now. What we have is a snapshot of a general overview Office activity by workload based off of the Azure Monitor workbook for Office 365, in particular Office and SharePoint. The second part of the dashboard shows the type of operations and an operations count. And the third snapshot shows the exact file operations as well as operation count and types of file. Here we have an example dashboard from the sign-in analysis of Azure AD, showing sign-in counts as well as by device and any potential interrupt accounts, which means that there may have been some potential anomaly, either a failed multi-factor authentication, bad username or password, things of that nature. In this last snapshot, draws attention to the troubleshooting sign-ins part of this Azure Monitor workbook, which shows that the user didn't really pass an MFA challenge, or that there were some other application anomalies happening, whether it be access permissions, silent sign-ins, things of that nature. But as you can see, these informational events and potentially error events or threats can be rolled up very quickly into these dashboards. Now that you've seen Azure Sentinel in action, let's talk about the permission roles based on RBAC for Azure Sentinel. There are three main permission roles called Azure Sentinel Reader, Azure Sentinel Responder, and Azure Sentinel Contributor. Those three roles are very flexible based on your SOC teams or your Security Operations Center, and allow you to delegate privileges based on who needs to potentially just view incidents and dashboards versus manage incidents, dismiss or assign alerts, or even to the point where you're creating and editing dashboards, creating other analytic rules, or other Azure Sentinel resources. Now, there's a fourth permission role that I've added here as well that's considered the Logic App Contributor. And that's important because as you start to build and create and run playbooks within your environment to do the automatic and automated threat hunting and response, that's a very important role that you need to delegate to at least one or more of your Security Operations Center individuals. Now, as a bit of my Christmas gift to you, I wanted to share my personal best practices for Azure Sentinel and Azure Log Analytics. First, you want to make sure that you absolutely 100% do your homework and you design your Log Analytics workspace appropriately. You want to make sure that you're consolidating your Log Analytics workspaces into a central workspace or as few workspaces as possible. This is very important because it allows you to focus on the data. It allows you to ingest the data into one location. And I understand there are some situations where you may want to break that up based on data sovereignty, different requirements within your environment. Potentially retention periods, things of that nature would play into this. But again, the important part is just make sure you do your homework. You want to make sure that you're keeping your costs low, but also keeping your management low and effective as well. Less log workspace or log analytics workspaces are better. Now I know I go out and I take a look at this and I see so many data sets that are available in Azure Sentinel. I want to click on every one of those 38 and light them up, but make sure that you are selecting the appropriate data sets and data sources for your environment. Start small. Small wins lead to big wins. So pick 1, 2, maybe 3 to start out with. Again, the Azure AD, the Azure AD sign-ins, things of that nature. The Office 365, getting information from both your Outlook and your SharePoint data is huge. That's a very big win, and no joke, it'll take you roughly 20 to 30 minutes to set that up in your environment. It'd be a wonderful win. It's things to show your security team, even your CIO. I did that in my environment. He was dancing for joy when I showed him some of the insights that we were getting from our environment. So just remember, keep those data sets at a minimum. Add only what you need, because that'll also help you control your costs. It's hugely important to make sure that you're using ARM templates. I feel like I know everyone keeps saying, do it, do it, do it. Make sure that you use Azure ARM templates. But no joke, please use ARM templates to deploy your VMs. And make sure to include the Log Analytics VM as an extension as a default. It's important because, to be honest, in this day and age, you don't want to be getting into the VMs and having to manually connect via remote desktop or some console into the VM to configure a Log Analytics agent. Make sure that you're including that Log Analytics VM extension as a default. It's easier to configure. You can use Azure Policy to configure and ensure the compliance of the VM extension. It's just a huge win. It takes a lot of that maintenance nightmare off of your hands and your engineers' hands. It's just a wonderful approach. And last but certainly not least, make sure to apply RBAC to workspace and ingested data. That is huge. There are some things that are still in preview. I know there's some table-based security and RBAC that you can put into place, but just remember and take into consideration that that data that's being pulled from SharePoint, from Office 365, there is some sensitivity to some of that data that's being ingested. So just be careful as to who you're delegating privileges to see what. As that table-based RBAC comes more to the forefront and comes out of preview, that would be huge for this environment and is definitely a welcome add. Well, that's a wrap on everything that I wanted to share today on Azure Sentinel. I hope you've enjoyed everything that I've brought to the table, and I just wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I wanted to thank both Gregor Suddy and Richard Hooper for this fantastic opportunity to share what I have with all you all, because the Azure family is absolutely huge to me, to this environment, and to the growth of the product and to the rest of the community. So the more we share, the more we can give back, the better our community becomes. So thank you all for listening and tuning in, and I really appreciate your time today.